Now, I'm not really sure why, but this is the third time since doing this, or since preparing for today, that I, for some reason, keep turning to Genesis 24. But this morning we're going to be in Genesis 28, actually. So, in Genesis 27, we saw Esau give up his birthright to Jacob, or more be tricked into it, fulfilling the prophecy of the older serving the younger. And in 28, Jacob and his brother are both sent separately to find themselves a wife. In verse 1 it says, "Then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and directed him, 'You must not take a wife from the Canaanite women. Arise, go to Paddan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take as your wife from there one of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brothers. God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may become a company of peoples. May he give the blessing of Abraham to you and to your offspring with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojourning that God gave to Abraham.' Thus Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Paddan Aram to Laban, the son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, Jacob and Esau's mother. Now Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Paddan Aram to take a wife from there, and that as he blessed him, he directed him, 'You must not take a wife from the Canaanite women.' And that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and gone to Paddan Aram. So when Esau saw that the Canaanite women did not please Isaac his father, Esau went to Ishmael and took as his wife, besides the wives he had, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebai." So, oddly enough, we remember that Jacob had tricked not only his brother into giving up his birthright, but actually had tricked his father when it came time to receive those blessings. Interesting enough, rather than holding that against him, Isaac actually just follows through with it and continues giving him blessings and instructions as it would pertain to the firstborn birthright. And so, typically these instructions for getting a wife, the reason for the insistence on getting a wife at this point is because the firstborn is responsible for taking over the family when the father dies. And Isaac is not doing well. Isaac is on the decline of his life, and so he's sending his son out to get a wife. It would be easy for Isaac to shun Jacob at this point for tricking him. In fact, I would argue that some of the more petty parents of today would have done so. But instead, Isaac honors the blessings that he had previously given to Isaac, even if it was by mistake. And so he starts treating Jacob like the actual firstborn. We notice here that the instructions for getting a wife for Jacob and Esau were the same instructions that was given to Isaac, right? That he was not to marry any Canaanite women. Now notice Esau's idea of pleasing his father was to get another wife from outside of the Canaanite women, while Jacob is actually going to look for his first wife in Paddan Aram, which is lands that the family owned, his distant relatives owned. In verse 10, Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran, and he came to a certain place and stayed there at night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in the place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you from wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and that is the gate of heaven. If you're not the place that he was in was a valley. Okay, so he's up on this ridge overlooking a valley. That's where he had camped out for the night. And really, so this idea is that he gets this vision while he's sleeping, seeing a ladder or a stairway going up to heaven. And different translations will say ladder, some will say stairway. That's where we get that concept of Jacob's ladder, which is a kid's game. But he sees this vision, the Lord speaks to him and repeats the promise that was given to both Abraham and Isaac. Which shows us that God also honored the birthright that was given. Even though it was gained through trickery and deceit, and even though it was given by mistake, God still honors it. In fact, I would argue that God fully expected everyone involved to honor it. Not because Jacob had any business having it, but because I believe it shows God being of integrity. Right? What God says is what God will do. And he expects the same thing out of his people. And so when Isaac gives this certain blessing that's reserved for the firstborn and acknowledges him as the firstborn, God expects him to follow through with that even though it was made by mistake. And one of the things that I find interesting about the story of Jacob's ladder here is the guy completely missed the point of it. Right? The idea was that God's saying, listen, I'm with you. I'm going with you. I'm going to take care of you. And Jacob's response is, God is in this place. So he completely misses the point because God's saying, listen, I'm going to go wherever you go. I'm going to be with you no matter what. And Isaac says, no, God is right here in this place. This place matters. And in fact, the place had nothing to do with anything. In fact, this is not going to be the last time that Jacob hears a message and just completely misses the point. The guy really doesn't strike me as all that intelligent, if I'm being honest. But he freaks out about this place. In fact, proclaiming that he did not even know that God was in this place. Basically saying, it's not my fault, I didn't know you were here. And in fact, there is an altar. Let me take a second look here. The notes I have says that by Jewish tradition there is an altar there that day, to this day, that he had set up in the place. We're not given that in the Bible, but it stands to reason that that's something he would have done. In verse 18 it says, So early in the morning Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on top of it. So that is the altar that they're talking of, I don't know that I agree that it would have lasted this long if it was a rock that was used as a pillow. He called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. So this is the first time in the Bible where we see the tenth coming, the idea of tithing coming in, and this promise that Jacob has made. Which in fact, to be clear, I believe, I'm a firm believer that this is why God actually makes it a rule. Because Jacob had promised him. I think that if Jacob had just been quiet, that the idea of tithing may easily have never been part of God's instructions. But it's one of those situations that when a man that follows God says he's going to do something, God fully expects him to follow through with that. In fact, so much so that when the Jews fail to fulfill that instruction of tithing, he punishes the entire nation. And once again, Jacob really kind of falters here, because God makes these promises to him, right? God says, I'm going to go where you go. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to return you to your father's household safe. And I'll not forsake you until I have fulfilled what I have promised you. And on top of that, has repeated the promises of making a great nation out of him and blessing all nations through his offspring. Again, Jacob's response is to say, well, if you take care of me and if you keep me safe, then I'll worship you as my God. And it's interesting to look back and remember in our lives how many times have we tried to make the same kind of deal with God. How many times in our lives have we said, God, if you just do this for me, I'll go to church. God, if you just do this for me, I'll be better about praying. God, if you keep this bad thing from happening, I'll tell people about you. How many times have those things worked? I mean, how many times have you honestly tried to barter with God and God actually took you up on it? I say from personal experience that there has not been one time where I've tried to blackmail or barter with God and had him actually take me up on a deal. But yet this is the guy who is really considered one of the great patriarchs of the Jewish people. He was raised by another great patriarch of the Jewish people, who was raised by the founder of the Jewish people. Right? All very godly men. Men who were raised up and taught to walk with God. And Jacob completely misses the nature of the relationship. He misses the point that this is a master-slave relationship. This isn't a business relationship. Jacob goes to I know I don't have a whole lot to say on this. It's an awfully short chapter, but Jacob is going to go to Padan Aram, and he is going to speak with his uncle, Laban, looking for a wife. And I'm fully convinced that the next chapter is kind of a we reap what we sow situation. And Jacob's going to find a lot of issues that have come up because of the type of person that he's allowed himself to be up to this point. In fact, both brothers end up marrying multiple women, which is, awfully interesting that God just accepts that and even blesses it when we know ourselves that God never intended for that to happen. And yet God keeps his word. When he says, I'm going to bless you and richly reward you and make a blessing of you, he keeps that no matter how bad it gets for the people, no matter how badly they miss the mark. He continues keeping those promises. And that goes all the way back to the way the covenant was made. If you remember the lesson that I gave on that when I said that the covenant that was shown by God walking through those animal carcasses while Abraham slept showed us that God was not going to expect us to try to uphold it somehow. That covenant was not contingent on anything Abraham or his offspring could do. Now keep in mind, while some people would try to make this deep connection between Old Testament and New here, we are talking about the Old Testament. The promise that nations would be made of their offspring, the promises that nations would be blessed from their offspring, we know that that's pointing to Christ. But it's not directly relatable to us. Because the covenant God makes with us is a completely separate covenant. Now, oddly enough, he does the exact same thing with the covenant with us. But it is completely separate. Is there any other comments that anyone else would like to make on this chapter? No? All right. Thank you.